NFL Draft Q&A. You're back with Brett and Scott. We are going to answer all of your questions. You guys submitted a bunch. We picked the best of the bunch, and we're going to go question by question and give you guys elite answers, hopefully. Scott, how are you, sir?
I'm doing good. I'm excited to dive into this first question because it's one we talked about before it was ever even asked. We had like a 10-minute phone call talking about this. And the first question comes from Sam Perry, who asks, "Would love to hear your thoughts on the Commanders' unique approach to a top 30 visit." And so I talked with Sam a little bit about this question. I'm like, "All right, what's your reasoning here? What are you thinking?" It's like, "Well, me and my buddy talk about this all day. I think it's absolutely genius. I'm sure you've seen the movie Draft Day. To me, this would reveal that, quote unquote, nobody came to his birthday party energy." So I love this. And we talked about this a little bit, Brett, because I was watching the Commanders pre-draft press conference and the GM was asked about this question. And like earlier on in the press conference, he said, "Yeah, we're not looking to trade down. We're going to pick at number 2. Yes, we're looking at the quarterback position. So we know Commanders probably not trading down, definitely taking a quarterback with that second overall pick." But later on, he was asked about this question, and I got weird vibes from it because the GM felt like he looked like a kid caught in a lie with his parents. Like he was blushing a little bit. He was kind of tripping over his words. He was a little uncomfortable. Like maybe he knew he made a mistake here or whatever. Because the big thing is like Jaden Daniels' agent came out and kind of put the Commanders organization under fire for not just meeting with Jaden Daniels one-on-one. It's that you invited all these quarterbacks there. And I think Sam has a point because this is basically what the GM said as for what his reasoning behind this is like, well, you get all these quarterbacks together, the big 4 quarterbacks. You really get to see who has that sort of charisma, who's a natural leader, who everyone gravitates towards, how they interact. Maybe there's one guy who doesn't fit in. And so all this is interesting to me, and I think these are all really good points. But you and I, it's mock draft conspiracy theory season, Brett. You and I were kind of putting our tinfoil hats on a little bit and going deep into the weeds on the conspiratorial aspects of this. And why don't you talk a little bit about what happened weeks ago when Jaden Daniels and the Commanders first met one-on-one, and what happened more recently with this meeting with the 4 quarterbacks?
Yeah, so they met, like a month ago or so, and somehow it leaked out that that meeting did not go well. I think it may have been Peter Schrager, NFL Network, that initially stated that, and then it popped up in a couple other mock drafts where it was just kind of this bullet point. Jaden meeting didn't go well with the Commanders, and then his agent liked a couple very suspect tweets about the Washington Commanders, and then next thing you know, their process kind of shifted away from. They were definitely mostly tied to Jaden Daniels, shifted away from, what, we're going to do our due diligence on the other guys, and they brought in all 4 quarterbacks into Washington for a meeting. By all 4, I mean not Caleb Williams. It was JJ McCarthy, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, and Michael Penix Jr. And they brought them in at the same time and kind of, had this. I think they had dinner together. They did some icebreaker activities, so to speak, and some real kind of funny cliche type things. But the aftermath of that was that Jaden Daniels' agent once again went on Twitter and tweeted. He actually tweeted, put his words behind it this time, and tweeted some suspect things about Washington. Was very complaining about the way they did the meeting. Liked some more suspect tweets. Really, real kind of whiny type stuff, and
A little bit of a red flag, right?
oh, massive red flag. And
Yeah.
to me,
Like
Scott,
diva personality kind
yes,
of.
and we had heard that too before the Washington stuff happened. We heard that Daniels had kind of a little bit of a diva persona. But the interesting thing to me is, if you're Washington, you do the 4 QB meeting for a reason, right? I feel like, and they still might make the mistake of drafting Jaden Daniels second overall, but I feel like they got what they wanted out of that. right? Like if you do that meeting, you're that's exactly what you're hoping for. Somebody rules themselves out. Somebody, plants their flag and shows you their true colors, and then you can say, all right, cool, you're off the list, and let's move on to the rest of the guys. But for whatever reason, the betting odds still think Jaden Daniels is the guy, and I don't see how there's any way they draft him though, right, Scott? Like,
so I'm thinking of that Windhorse meme where it's like, now why would he do that? Why would the Commanders do that? Like if they knew Jaden Daniels was going to be the guy, why would you bring in 4 guys? Why wouldn't you just meet with him privately or have him meet with the wide receivers on the team or something like that? Like the Bears are doing with Caleb Williams. But more importantly, it's why would he do that? Why would Jaden Daniels' agent come out, say the meeting went horribly, kind of imply the Commanders don't know what they're doing and they're a Mickey Mouse organization, and then come after them again after this, where it's like, this is kind of like Mickey Mouse move, this isn't how like real organizations do it. And I feel like they're priming the collective unconscious to like, the Commanders they don't know what they're doing. They're about to make a big mistake. They're about to pass on Jaden Daniels, because like everything you're hearing from Adam Schefter, from Bob McGinn, is that Jaden Daniels is the number 1 or number 2 quarterback in this draft on just about every board. That's what you're hearing.
from
But
Schefter's completely, he's done.
you're a rap sheet guy, is that what you're saying?
I'm not claiming a side here. You can just tell Schefter's entire feed this draft season has been agent speak. Like he's completely bought and sold by the agents.
Well, anyway,
like,
that's just what you're hearing. And like, if the agent believes that, right, it's just, they're about to make a mistake. And so like all this in combination makes me think Commanders are taking either May or McCarthy.
I agree with you.
Because why else would you attack this organization where your quarterback's very likely to play?
I wouldn't draft him.
You wouldn't.
I would reconsider. Yeah. I'm not doing that. I'm freaking old school. Like, no.
Yeah.
This isn't about you, son.
Damn, you're gonna sun him like that. All right. Well,
I am.
Well, he's also not one of your top 2 quarterbacks, so that's okay.
I like him though. I've done nothing but sing his praises. So,
but you like this move, genius draft day move.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Not to go full Carl Jung on the conversation, but men like to separate themselves into natural hierarchies, right? So you get 4 alpha dogs in a room. You're gonna see who the true alpha is really freaking fast.
Right. And so here's my next question to you: is you have the big 4 quarterbacks at this meeting. Who do you think the alpha was? Like if you're
already know the answer.
You're hanging out with me, Graham Barfield, John Hansen, everyone knows the alpha is me, right? And so if you're with these 4 quarterbacks, who do you think separate? Who do you think is the most charismatic guy, the natural leader, gets along with? Who do you think that? And who do you think sulking in a corner?
So we know Jaden was the one
putting their nail polish on.
Oh, well, Caleb wasn't there, Scott, so relax.
Okay.
You know my answer. It's JJ McCarthy. The guy has all the charisma in the world. He is the leader type. He's the QB wins guy, Scott. You tweeted it yesterday, and you've received lots of ire for simply pointing out the kid won games. I think it's JJ easy. Drake May, when he talks, it sounds like he's, I don't know,
not the smartest guy in the
world. Like 5 or 6 Bud Lights deep, and he just played 18. I don't know. Like he's, I can't imagine he shined in a moment like that. But I definitely have confidence JJ did. So
okay, all right. I think we did a good job with this one. That was a fun question. So thank you, Sam Perry.
All right, the next question is from friend of the show, D-Bro, Derek Brown. He asked, most important route running trait for a wide receiver. Ooh, this is good. I don't know, Scott, if you have data points for this, but I'm kidding, obviously. So I would say the ability for players to keep their frame compact when they're breaking out of a route. So if you go watch a receiver and he's coming up to his break point and he has really far extension away from his body with his feet, he's telling you where he's going with his hips. And so the more a receiver is able to stop by sinking his body weight and exploding from a compact stance, the more effective that route break is going to be, the more smooth it's going to be, the more explosive it's going to be, the more separation he's going to generate out of that break. The further away they get, the least or the less compact they get at the break point. They're not only telegraphing where they're going, but the power and explosion is not going to be there. You're going to see defensive backs that get handsy at the top of the route. That's where they get rerouted and taken out of their the precision aspect of the route. So yeah, I would say that's the deal there. That's what I'm looking for when I'm scouting route running.
Next, no, I don't have it. I'm not about to try. Brett is the film goat, of the smartest film mind I know, and his best position, I think, is wide receivers. Just an insane hit rate over the years. So I'm not about to chime in with my film thoughts in comparison to Brett. Just whatever he says is whatever I agree and believe. Next question comes from Jordan W. What goes through your head when you see that a wide receiver or running back regressed in their final season of college? And do you have any stats to show how predictive that is of NFL success? Is it a big red flag, or is it something to ignore? Um, I think it always is important to look into the context of why that might have happened. Like Chris Olave appeared to be the alpha, and then the next season, Garrett Wilson kind of took over, was more efficient, more productive than he was. And to me, that was just like a small red flag where it's like, oh, well, maybe Garrett Wilson is better than Olave, rather than Olave being better than Wilson, who had the better career marks Olave did. And it's just different things like that. I will just say for my model, final season production is really important with running backs. For wide receivers, it doesn't really factor into my model. It's much more what you've done over your career, and then what your best season was. And I can refer to the best season by a few different things. Typically, your best season by age adjusted yards per route run, or your best season by age adjusted and target competition adjusted, whatever metrics. And so that's kind of how I think about it. Brett, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think you nailed it with the context. Context is always important, especially when you're talking like a guy like Blake Corum, who was coming off a really bad injury, or even Marvin Harrison Jr., who went from CJ Stroud to Kyle McCord at quarterback. Like that's a massive downgrade. There's other. I also like to qualify like what is regression. So statistically, yeah, Scott is going to tell you all that, but I look on tape. Like that's what I'm looking for from a regression standpoint. Like, did the player actually play worse? Or does it look the same or better? So yeah, if a player's tape got worse and we don't, it's like Jim Nagy always uses the quote, there's reasons and there's excuses. So like if there's actual reasons why a player's tape regressed, then we can live with that usually. And I grade accordingly. If there's not, if there's just excuses why, then that's I look on that very, I mean, I'm harsh, I guess, with my scores. So I want that linear growth, as Scott mentioned. Which organization is the best fit for JJ McCarthy? I know at one point the Commanders seemed to have real interest, but personally, he screams New England Patriot to me. Woof, that's a lot to unpack. So JJ, we do have a video on YouTube. Go check it out. We talk JJ in there. I think we get into a couple different landing spots. Ultimately, I think JJ is the best quarterback in the draft class. I think every organization is the best fit for JJ. I think he's that good. The one I wouldn't want him to go to is New England Patriots, though. Whoever asked that question, Tracy, because that roster's just void of talent across the board. They have a guy starting at left tackle this year that's got 1,200 career snaps over the course of like 6 or 7 seasons. He's a traditional right tackle. They have no receivers, really poor tight end room. I mean, Hunter Henry's okay. He's just often hurt. It's going to be tough sledding for him. So I think he'd be great for the Commanders, especially when you talk about how their offensive line isn't in the best shape right now. I think JJ is so good at mitigating pressure. I think of all the quarterbacks in this class, he would probably do best there. And then, Minnesota obviously would be a slam dunk as well.
Yeah. So just in case this is a fantasy question, really, Vikings are the ideal, the dream. They led the league in team passing yards last year with 3 different backup quarterbacks, just insanely high volume, smart offensive coordinator. I don't think Denver's a bad spot either, and we'll get to that question in a second because Rock S asks, please tell me that the Broncos will finally draft a franchise quarterback for the first time and who it will be. And so I do think this is the case. And obviously, the Broncos just traded for Zach Wilson. Like, that's just a total non-factor to me. I like, people are saying this is Sean Payton hubris, but like, I don't know. I love Sean Payton. Yeah, who knows? Get your hands on him and try and teach him a few things, give him a full year to sit, see if you can correct the mental component that he's lacking, maybe in his own head too much, maybe a little too shook, no confidence, but that's like years down the road. And it's just like they spent nothing on him and it's a total long shot. But yeah, I don't think he's not going to weigh into this decision at all. He's not going to be a factor barring injury for a number of years, I think, because you look at Sean Payton, who I have a ton of respect for, like, at least from a fantasy perspective, like his teams have always been awesome, or at least way better than quarterback play suggests. Like, you look at what like Teddy Bridgewater and Taysom Hill and Jameis Winston and like 3 other backup quarterbacks whose names you can't remember have all done. It's like really impressive. Like, what happened when he was saddled with that horrific quarterback play? Like, he retired. He was out of the league. I'm done. I can't do this anymore. And then he just had a year with Russell Wilson, and you could tell he hated Russell Wilson's guts, just through like the actions and then just like what you see on the sideline. Hates his guts. And you could tell before that season, like, he was not married to him. Maybe it was part of the deal to get him to be head coach of the team. Was like, listen, I know it stinks for us salary cap wise, but like, he could be gone at the end of this year, and look at what happened. He's gone. And this is a guy who I don't think he wants another year with suspect quarterback play. I think he's going to be aggressive. He's always been aggressive and go out and get his guy. And I think this is one of those situations where it's just like GM as figurehead. The head coach is really calling the shots. Like, look at the insane contract he has. And so, yeah, I think no matter what, he's getting a quarterback in the first 2 rounds, probably first round. Wouldn't shock me if we see him try and trade up with for JJ McCarthy. I know everyone's talking about the Vikings leapfrogging the Giants, but really wouldn't shock me if the Broncos try and do the same thing. And then if not, I think Bo Nix is a very likely possibility. Jim Nagy came on my podcast and said, I think the Broncos would really like Bo Nix. And I was thinking the same thing. So yeah, I think that's a great spot to put in your mock draft, Brett. Denver taking a quarterback. And what do you think? You disagree?
Well, so we got to be a little more specific with the term franchise quarterback. I don't think they're drafting a franchise quarterback necessarily. I think they're drafting a quarterback. The franchise quarterbacks are the top 4. They're not getting one of those unless they trade up for JJ McCarthy, as you mentioned. I do think that's a real possibility if JJ gets to a certain point. I know from my sources, albeit I don't have a lot of sources, but I do have some that have told me that the Broncos do indeed love JJ McCarthy. So I could see that happening. I've pivoted, though. I was Bo Nix all the way. I think I gave the Broncos Bo Nix in all 3 of my mock drafts so far this season. And I've switched that to Michael Penix Jr. I think they take him at 12. And that will be, when you see my final mock drop tomorrow on the site, you'll see that. You'll see Michael Penix Jr. at 12 to the Denver Broncos. When I started doing research on the workups, all the work they've done on the quarterbacks, they've done exceedingly more work on Penix Jr. than Bo Nix. Like, they've talked to Bo Nix 1 time. They've talked to Michael Penix Jr. 4 or 5 times. So, including sent an entourage to his pro day, combine, Senior Bowl, top 30 visit twice. They've invested a lot of time into Penix. So maybe that's simply because, teams don't always use their 30 visits in their scouting resources for themselves. Sometimes they do it because, the Raiders have been connected to Penix. So it's like, cool, we're going to get as much info on Penix as we can because we're going to be playing the guy twice a year. It's possible that's why. But I just think, when you see it, like quarterback is one of those positions where you can't really hold your cards close to your vest. You have to do the work on the guys. So like you'll see good teams a lot of times they'll draft a player in the first round that they don't have an official 30 visit with, right? That I don't think the Lions have actually drafted a player in the first round in this regime where they've met with the guy on a 30 visit. So I think quarterback's different though, where you really do have to sit down with that guy. You got to pick his brain. You got to figure out what's between the ears. So I just can't help but think like Penix is their guy based on the amount of work they've done with him.
Yeah, I just want to say that's a good landing spot. Like, don't look at the wide receivers. Like Sean Payton, good landing spot. Since 2018, Taysom Hill averaged 20.5 fantasy points per start. Drew Brees, age 39, 40, 41, couldn't throw farther than 15 yards, which, is also a knock you're hearing on Bo Nix. 19.8 fantasy points per start. Trevor Siemian, 18 fantasy points per start. Jameis Winston, 17.2. Teddy Bridgewater, 17.1. That's all like fringe low end QB1 production. So, yeah.
And those guys aren't good.
Yeah, exactly. So Sean Payton, that's a fun, sexy landing spot for me, although probably most people I think would disagree.
Scott, let's play a little game here. So they say they draft Penix or Nix at 12, I guess doesn't matter. And then let's say they go in the second round and they draft a Jalen Polk or Jalen McMillan to put with Penix. How would you feel about that?
I mean, well, I'd be bummed because it's hopefully Marvin Mims season who can bail me out of all my takes from last year that aged poorly. But
he could still be a dude though, McMillan and Polk aren't special players. They'd just be upgrades to Josh Reynolds and Cortland Sutton.
Yeah. And we did hear per sources that the Broncos were trying to trade Cortland Sutton, and they are pretty high on Mims. He just needs to win that job. It's going to be a true competition, but they liked what they saw and the growth he had, and they have a plan in mind for him. But yeah, I just like that in the sense that it's like the Texans last year. Like no one was on CJ Stroud, no one was on Nico, no one was on Tank Dell. All those guys were super cheap, and then they defied expectations and had this like monster year. And maybe the Broncos don't have a monster year like that, but I do see there being value with if it's any of those wide receivers and the quarterback.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think like the Broncos have a pretty stable offensive line situation, and this class is loaded at receiver. It's not hard to get better at receiver with this draft class. So I know people are looking at that and scoffing at the weapons, but I think it could turn around really quickly, especially if you get development from a Marvin Mims. Josh Reynolds is steady. He will help a rookie quarterback too because of his precision route running. So I do think there's an element to this where it's like that would be a really underrated landing spot. So next question from CW Sloan. The most intriguing part of the draft is picks 3 through 5. If you had to bet money on all three spots, what's your lean on each pick? Trades. I have very, very strong opinions on this, but I can't share until my mock draft comes out. I can't spoil it, man.
Wow. You're going to big time him like that?
Should I just spoil it? I'll spoil it. The mock draft comes out in 24 hours. Who cares?
Man of the people.
By the time this video gets up, it might be 12 hours. Actually, I don't know. I think Trey's pushing this out right away. But all right. Picks 3 through 5. So let's assume we got Caleb 1 in some form of Drake May or Jaden Daniels 2. That's the way I'm leading right now. At 3, I do think the Patriots will try to trade out. But if they were to stand pat, actually, no, let's do this. Minnesota trades up to 3. They take JJ McCarthy or Drake May, whoever's left standing. And then at 4, I'd think the Arizona Cardinals, this one's going to blow everyone's mind. Again, I think they try to trade out, actually. But if they can't, I think they stand pat and they take Rome Dunes. Yep.
Over Marv?
Over Marv. Can't get into why I think that.
Okay.
But I do think that happens. I do think they try to trade out. There's a solid chance they're successful in trading out, in which maybe they take Rome, somewhere 8, 9, 10, something like that or whatever. But anyways, so Roma Dunes at pick 4. At pick 5, I have the Indianapolis Colts trading up from pick 15 all the way to 5 to take Marvin Harrison Jr., completing the circle of life.
Wow.
And this is a completely serious take, by the way. This isn't like a fantasy land.
I mean, that's fun. That's a fun landing spot for Marv. Even if he's not the wide receiver 1 and he's salty about that.
Why wouldn't he be?
Right. Yeah.
I mean, Pittman's possession guy, and Marv is better in every way, shape, or form. And Josh Downs might suck, so we got that.
Well, that's a unique draft. I like it.
It is a unique draft, and hopefully it wins me a mock draft championship.
Next question is from Daniel. What are your thoughts if Johnny Wilson Jr. moves over to tight end? I mean, from a fantasy perspective, like that's awesome to me. Like that's sick. Yeah, he would probably be my tight end 2 in the class if he was a tight end. What do we want from fantasy tight ends? We want wide receivers masquerading as tight ends. You know, not really pass blocking all that much, but they're on the field for every snap, running routes. They're good receivers. They're like Darren Waller's the dream. And if you look at Johnny Wilson athletically, like people are saying he's too tall. He looks like a Mike Evans clone to me. He looks like a Darren Waller clone to me. And so that's like pretty exciting because the big red flag on Johnny Wilson's profile is struggled to separate, really high red flag contested target rates in each of the last 2 seasons. Typically, I just write those guys off. I just cross them off. But there was enough within his profile relative to cost to get me really excited. But I mean, you move him to tight end, and that really mitigates the separation issues because now you're up against safeties and linebackers as opposed to cornerbacks. That's just my thoughts. But Brett, I remember being at the Senior Bowl with you and you having concerns about that projection where you're like, you don't really see him as a wide receiver and you don't know that he can be a tight end.
Well, just the developmental curve that will come with him switching to tight end is pretty steep, right?
Is
like
it?
He has insane. Tight end is probably the second hardest position to play in the league.
Yeah, but Jimmy Graham, Antonio Gates, they've had 1 year of playing tight end and 5 years of basketball, and then
you're
as
now
a sophomore they were
Hall of Famers, so that's great. That's cool.
I mean, they were nobodies at the time, and then sophomore year they set like NFL historical position records.
I mean, sure, I do think
he's on that level as a freak athlete.
He is. Darren Waller's another one, obviously. Waller, Gates, even Gronk. Gronk kind of came out of nowhere.
Logan Thomas,
Robert
Tonyan. There's a bunch of positional change tight ends.
A boob, but yeah. Why did you Robert Tonyan? What? Who cares about Robert Tonyan?
What did he was a wide receiver? Yeah, you're right. Who changed to tight end?
Yeah, and like was not very good. Like
he had like 12 touchdowns on like 16 targets. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
You're right.
Because of Devontae Adams and Aaron Rodgers.
Right.
Yeah.
He had a usable fantasy season. That's all I mean. Just go ahead.
There is a developmental curve in that, like the processing that happens at tight end is a lot different. Could they start with him just being a pass catcher and live with the consequences of poor run block? Yeah, sure. That's what happened with Gates and Jimmy Graham. Those guys weren't good in the run game at all for the first few years, and they did develop, and the teams they played on kind of just lived with that until they didn't really have to. The other thing too is if you're going to make a move like that, move a guy to tight end, you're probably going to be interested in playing a lot of 12 personnel because you still want to manufacture those matchups as you see fit, which means he's not likely going to have to be a point of attack inline blocker that often. So all that to say, I do think Wilson's probably better as a tight end. I know it's like a hot take right now. There's been like a recent push by certain Twitter people that be like, no, he can run routes, I promise you. And then they show no evidence of that. The thing that scares me with him is he can't stop. Like it's like turning a semi truck, trying to get that guy to stop or break out of on his route. So it's tough. So against, when he's got free access and space and, time to set his routes down and win against linebackers, it's a totally different ballgame. So I think that'd be a huge win for John E. Wilson.
Yeah. Just to your point on that learning curve, like that is a valid point. Like one of the biggest cheat codes in fantasy is like fade a tight end as a rookie, target him as a sophomore. We just saw that with Trey McBride. We did see like the rookies hit and Sam Laporta last year, but that's typically not all that common. I just wanted to circle back on Johnny Wilson though, just because I remember sitting next to you at the Senior Bowl and I'm like, oh dude, this guy would be awesome if they just moved him over to tight end. And you're like, yeah, I don't know that he could do that just because like his hips are so narrow. What does that have to do with it? Yeah, his hips. Shakira said hips don't lie. Does he have lying hips, Brett?
No, so he's 230 pounds ish right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think he played at 237 last year. Is what he was listed at. So like when you look at his frame, it's so narrow. It's like reasonably how much weight can we add to that?
Mm-hmm.
And there's no tight ends in the league right now that are 230.
Mm-hmm.
They've gotten smaller for sure. If you could get him into the 240s, that would be helpful. But he's so long and so tall. It's like he probably need to be heavier than that,
Mm-hmm.
because the way that you know, I guess that like base, that anchor, and the run game and pass pro. Like I know those are stuff we don't care about as fantasy guys, but to get really on the field, he's going to have to at least do a little bit of that, and like they're going to have to trust him out there. So he's going to have a little bit more mass, I think. But yeah, I mean, shoot, Darren Waller's up to what, 255 pounds now? Like he's a big boy, and he started at like 235. So yeah, that's my only concern.
Yeah,
He's just so
we need a waist measurement on Waller though.
right. That's true. It'd be like, is Waller like a 32-inch waist? Because I think Johnny Wilson might be like he tiny little waist. So I think this is the last question.
Yep.
Blake Corum would be a perfect fit in a Dallas Cowboys backfield. Do you guys see a similar size and style as the former Cowboy great Emmitt Smith? Underrated pass catching, great vision in tight space, good in pass protection, great production every year in college. Great fit. Oh, it sounds like Patrick answered his own question. But I don't know. I'm not competent to Emmitt Smith. I'm sorry. Emmitt Smith is like a top 6 running back of all time.
Yeah, Alexander Madison was my comp, I think. So
yeah,
just from an analytics like fantasy perspective, what was your comp? Because you had him RB1, so it's going to be better than that.
My comp was J.K. Dobbins.
Okay, nice. Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah,
because of all just injuries. No, I'm just messing with you.
No, for real. Somebody hit me with that on Twitter when
nice.
So like, yeah, Corum and Dobbins makes sense with the knee injuries. Yeah, thanks. They were not even close to as severe as JK, but no, just the movement skills, size. Like they're both really, really short, got the stocky base, wide base, but just freakish ability to cut. Their cutting ability, short area quickness, change and direct skills, they just look the exact same to me. So I think he'd be great to answer the heart of the question. I do think he'd be a great fit in Dallas, right? So like for everything you mentioned, vision, burst, underrated the potential to make guys miss, underrated in the pass game. I think he could step in and be a really effective running back there. Yeah. What about you, Scott?
Yeah, I mean, of course he's a great fit for Dallas. Like Dallas is the dream landing spot for all these running backs. All these running backs would be a great fit there. Where they go there, you see their ADP jump 6 spots. Yeah, I mean, I'm not the Corum guy. You're the Corum guy. Insane vision, all that. That's a really good landing spot. I think Giants are a good landing spot. I think Panthers are a good landing spot. Chargers are a good landing spot. Yeah, and I don't know. Don't have much to add, but beyond that. But you were a lot higher on him than I was.
Yeah, fair enough. Did you, while we're here, did you happen to see DJ's running back rankings?
Yeah, you put my guy Blake Watson in his top 150.
Yeah, I think DJ and my rankings were very close, though. I was surprised.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think the only one we disagreed on, like by more than one slot, was Blake Corum. Everyone else, we were within one guy of each other all the way down. So,
well,
Shipley, he's high in Shipley too, unlike you.
I saw that.
Yeah, DJ knows ball. Just kidding. Well, I'm not kidding. He does know ball, but I hate that phrase. I want to wound myself for using it. All right, let's wrap. Let's tie a bow on this. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to go to our YouTube page. We have breakdowns on most of the guys we talked about today, Corum included. Like we have a Corum breakdown coming out today, I think, actually. So make sure you go to YouTube, Fantasy Points YouTube, check that out. Also, the 2024 Prospect Guide is out. Defensive players are getting loaded in right now. I did edge defenders. We got corners finishing up today, and then tomorrow will be defensive tackles and linebackers. If I'm thinking about not writing linebackers up because they're the running back of the defense. Anyways, check that out. Scott Barrett's rookie model articles are out. He's got wide receivers, running backs, tight ends out on the site right now. They're like 16,000 words a pop, but it's worth every single second you read it because they're awesome. Even I learn something when I read those. So anyways, be sure to check out all of our stuff on fantasypoints.com and YouTube. We are out.